911 prices surged during the last 1.5 years. 996s, for example, increased by more than 50%, but this seems to be ending now. We already saw price stabilizations for some turbo models, and we can see now that this generalizes to the rest of the market. However, there are some sub-segments to which this doesn't apply and that still saw a price increase. To figure out what exactly happened in the Carrera market, I will show you must-knows about the price development in the 996, 997, 991 and 992 market. This inevitably involves looking at a lot of data, but to keep things manageable we won't dive too deep into each specific market segment. And this is a bit different from my previous videos in which we covered each generation separately, so please let me know in the comment section which setup you prefer, this one or the previous one. But now then, before we have a look at the 911 price trends, let's quickly review today's market so we know what's what. Over here we have the model year perspective for the US market, and you can see that each generation has a different color. In total there are 1,565 clean titles for sale, and this only includes the Carrera models. The Targas are not included in this video. Looking at the prices, there are no big surprises, especially if you're familiar with the 911 lineup. You'll recognize that there are big differences between the generations, but also within the generations. We can see, for example, a large price break between the 996 and 997 markets, but also between the 997.1 and 997.2 market. A 997.2 is, for example, $23,000 more expensive than a 997.1. But let's move on to the price developments over time and what this means for you as a buyer. Yet, first I would like to get your attention for today's video sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by Exclusive Auctions. If you haven't heard about them yet, you should check them out. Exclusive Auctions is a new online auction platform for buying and selling sports cars, exotic cars, race cars and specialty vehicles, and it has some really great features. For example, if you choose their gold listing package, there are 0 seller listing fees. They also offer full service after sale support with everything from pre-purchase inspections and transportation to escrow services, ensuring that both buyer and seller hold up to their end of the bargain. Click on the link below or go to exclusiveauctions.com and register to bid or sell your car today. But let's continue the video now with the price developments. Over here we have the prices for the 996, 997, 991 and 992. If you see this graph for the first time, you'll probably notice that all of these lines are trending up. Just like all other car prices in the US, 911 prices surged. However, the most extreme increase took place in the 996 market. It's not so obvious due to the scaling of the graph, but 996 prices increased from $23,500 in June 2020 to $35,600 in November 2021. And that's an increase of more than 50%. Now if you want to know more about that increase or about any of the other price increases, then I recommend that you head over to my channel and check out some of the older market update videos. We will namely focus on the most recent development, the formation of the market top. You see, for all generations the price increase seems to have halted. Some generations even saw a price decrease. If we look at the 996 and 997 market, we can see that prices decreased in both of them and that they are more or less on the same level as what they were in August of last year. 996 prices even came down by 6%, and this price drop is statistically confirmed, and this means that it's unlikely to be the result of chance. The price drop is then also visible in the base and the 4S market. However, it mainly affected the cars with less than 80,000 miles. The high mileage cars are unaffected by this drop. With -3%, 997 prices decreased less than 996 prices. The price drop is then also not statistically confirmed. It's not the full 997 market that shifted down. There's one segment in which prices continue to increase, but we will circle back to that later in the video. If we move on down with the 991 and 992 market, we can see that prices still increased, but that the increase rate is flattening. Also, you can see that we're missing the November 2021 data point, so there's a good possibility that the price trends are similar to the 996 and 997 price trends, meaning that prices decreased during the last 3 months, but we don't have any evidence for this. If we work with what we have, we can see that 991 prices continue to increase as prices went up from $96,000 to $99,600, hereby displaying an increase of 4%. This increase might seem small, but it is statistically confirmed. So let's have a look at the 992 market. Prices increased from $145,000 to $147,000, and this means an increase of only 1%. It will therefore be of no surprise to you that this price change is not statistically confirmed. So to sum it up, we can see that the market starts to change. Prices climbed for a long time, but that trend appears to have ended now. 996 prices decreased with 6% and 997 prices decreased with 3%, but this drop was not statistically confirmed. In line with this, we also saw that 991 and 992 prices saw a decrease in the increase rate. 991 prices still increased with 4%, but 992 prices basically remained flat. Now all of these developments become especially interesting if we also take the supply levels into account. So let's have a look at the market characteristics graph before we do the deep dive to the 997 market. Over here we have now from left to right the supply, median mileage and median model year development. And this reveals a few interesting things. If we start with the 996 and 997 market, we can see that the supply patterns are close to identical. Supply dropped significantly when prices surged and increased slightly when prices cooled down. Though more recently we can see that supply levels have been falling. They're dropping incrementally, but compared to August of last year the difference starts to be significant. And this might be an important indication that prices won't tumble any further. Prices are indeed a lot higher than in April 2020, but supply is significantly lower. Hence, given that prices are up while supply is down, it's likely that demand didn't decrease, but we can't observe this directly. But all of this is different for the 991 and 992 market. Over there we can see a different pattern. Also there, between the beginning of 2020 and mid-2021 supply dropped. However, it increased during the last 5 months. 991 supply levels are even above December 2019 values, so they are above pre-pandemic levels. It's always difficult to pinpoint the exact reason for these movements. Perhaps these are trade-ins to the 992. If you have any thoughts on this, please share them in the comment section. In any case, the supply increase clearly supports the slowdown in prices, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a flat price development in that market if current supply levels are maintained. So we saw now the supply and price development for all generations. Prices are cooling down or already decreasing, but supply developments differ between the 996 and 997 on the one hand and the 991 and 992 on the other hand. Consequently, both have their own influence on future prices. However, as I mentioned earlier, there are some market segments which are going against the trends that we just saw. I namely checked various market segments such as the manuals versus the automatics, the coupes versus the cabriolets, and the two-wheel drive versus the four-wheel drive cars. And this revealed that there are some sub-segments in the 997 market that go against the larger trend. And this is of course key information if you're looking to purchase a 997. Let's remind ourselves about the price development in the 997 market. Prices increased basically since April 2020 and they dropped now by 3%, but this drop is not statistically confirmed. Now an important reason for the fact that it's not confirmed is that the price change is not consistent in all market segments. 997.2 prices namely surged while the rest remained flat. Let me show you. Over here we have in orange the price development for the 997.2 and in blue for the 997.1. And look at that. 997.2 prices increased with 7.1% during the last 3 months, and this increase is statistically confirmed. And this is a significant event given that .1 prices remained basically flat and that the used car market in general started to cool down. Moreover, due to the differences in the price developments, the gap between the two generations is now at a record size. A .2 demands now a premium of $23,000 or 41%. While historically this has been around $17,000 or 37%. And this will only take you one Google search to find a possible explanation for the difference in the price developments. The 997.2 is praised by many and it's frequently named as the best modern 911. It will then also be interesting to see how this develops in the future. Is this a significant event where .2 prices detach themselves from .1 prices? Or will the two price trends converge? If we break these numbers down even further, we might get an answer to this question. We can namely see that the increase in the 997.2 market is driven by the S models. These increased with 9%, whereas the base models remained flat. So there's a very clear distinction between the two markets. But now then, please stay with me here. We can go one level deeper and figure out exactly where the price increase in the 997.2 S market is coming from. It's namely driven by the low mileage cars. Over here we have the price, median model year and supply development for the 997.2 S market between November 2021 and now. Yet, this graph is now split by the different mileage buckets. The blue line, for example, shows the development for the cars between 0 and roughly 23,000 miles. And if we look at the price developments for that segment, we can see that this segment is responsible for the price increase. Prices for low mileage cars went up from $82,000 to $89,000, hereby equaling 8.5%. The increase in other segments is much smaller. Moreover, we can also see that supply is way up. It increased from 12 to 21 cars. So to sum it up, the 997.2 S market saw a price increase because prices for low mileage cars increased, while at the same time also supply for low mileage cars increased. So what on earth is going on here? Well, I think that there are two possible explanations. First, it might be so that the price data at August 2021 was not representative of the low mileage market segment, as supply was a lot lower than what it is now. However, I think that this is unlikely. If we look at the same price development for all dates, we can see that the price development in the low mileage market is surprisingly stable, notwithstanding severe supply fluctuations. You can see that the most recent increase really sticks out. Second, and I think this is the more likely explanation, the 997.2 market might be moving towards a collector's market. It is in these markets that low mileage cars that are in prime condition demand a significant premium. And as I mentioned before, the 997 is frequently named as the best modern 911, and it therefore has the potential to become a collectible. This price development over here might be the first sign of that. However, we need more data to really confirm it. But what do you think? Is this just a temporary deviation from the rest of the market, or will we see low mileage 997.2 S prices drift further away from the rest of the market? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. But now then, what do all of these price developments mean for you as a buyer? That's of course a good question, and it depends largely on what you expect as a buyer. If you're someone who is looking for an investment vehicle, then it might not be the best moment to enter this market. As I said in several of my other videos, I think that there's a higher chance that prices will remain stable or decrease than that they will increase. After all, prices are high and we are seeing stabilizing price trends in more and more markets. Consequently, I think it's unlikely that you can buy a 911 right now and flip it in 6 months for an immense profit. There are always exceptions possible, but I think that this covers the general market movement. However, if you're a buyer who just wants a car to enjoy, while at the same time don't want to lose a fortune to depreciation, I don't see any reason as to why you shouldn't get one. Sure, prices might come down slightly as values might succumb to their normal depreciation pattern. And this might be unique given the price developments of the last 2 years, but it in fact means a return to business as usual. I don't think that a full-fledged market crash is likely in the foreseeable future, as both demand and supply are changing relatively slow. However, one thing to keep in mind is that the older generations start to show signs of a collectible car market. We only did a deep dive for the 997 market, but if you look at the previous 911 market analysis, you see that this also goes for other generations, like for example the 996. A consequence of this is that low mileage cars can go for high premiums, and this also means that they will lose more when you start to add a significant number of miles to them. Therefore, if you belong to this second group of buyers, it might not be a good idea to buy a car from the lowest mileage bucket of its respective market. Now, if you belong to the third group of buyers, the ones who don't care about depreciation, then you probably already clicked away right after you left a comment describing how you buy a new car every year and are happy to pay this depreciation. And with that, let's do a quick summary before we close the video. 911 prices increased a lot during the last years, but they're topping now. We even saw a confirmed price decrease in the 996 market. 997 prices are more or less stable, while 991 and 992 prices saw a clear flattening of the price trend. We then did a deep dive into the 997 market, and this revealed that low mileage 997.2 S models moved against the larger market trend. They saw a significant price increase. And all of this means that it's probably not the best moment to buy any of these cars right now if you're in it mainly for investment purposes. However, if you're looking for something that you can drive without losing a ton of money, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't get a 911. You just need to accept that the car might follow its original depreciation curve, meaning that a 992 is more likely to lose more than a 996. In my opinion, a full-blown market crash in which values return to their pre-pandemic levels is unlikely, at least in the foreseeable future. And with that, we arrived at the end of this video. Now, if you enjoyed this data-driven way of analyzing car markets, but would have liked to see the analysis for a different car, let me know for which car you would like to see an analysis down below in the comment section. When there are enough requests for a certain car, I will make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week for a new video.